everyone. This is Gina at Korean Canine Rescue, and today I am so excited to bring you back-to-back holistic health advice and information. We're doing a live stream right now, and today we have Narelle Cook from Sydney, Australia. She is a holistic clinical neuropath and nutritionist, here to answer your questions about canine nutrition and talk about how important it is to feed your dog a raw diet and make sure they're getting the nutrition they need. So thank you so much for joining us today, Narelle. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Gina. No, I'm really excited to be here and supporting the group and supporting your listeners. So clinical naturopath and nutritionist, and I operate my own private practice in Sydney, Australia. So very exciting. I'm getting some feedback. I don't know if you are.
I don't hear any feedback on my end.
Okay, good. I'll just keep going. So yeah, really excited. So I've worked as a research scientist for over 20 years, but mainly in the field of human health and nutrition. And it's only been recently, well, in the last 5 or so years, that I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, our dogs could benefit just as much from a more species appropriate natural raw food diet, and a lot of the more holistic treatment options too for their, you know, overall health and well-being. So I went back to uni and did further studies on animal health and nutrition. And now in my private practice, I treat both humans and dogs. So sometimes I'll get the dogs and then the owners will book in to see me, or sometimes the owners will book in to solve their health problems and go, oh, by the way, you know, my dog has, you know, skin issues. Can you help him too? So
that's actually a really neat concept, combining the two. And of course, you know, you have extensive knowledge in both. But it's early in Sydney, right? It's like early morning, and you got up to join us and brainstorm about all things dog nutrition. So, I mean, this is a topic that fascinates not only me, but a lot of us in the rescue community. And I've always felt like it's something that's been overlooked in the rescue world in general. Just, you know, feeding something beyond the basic kibble that a lot of the shelters and rescues get. We decided at Korean Canine to take it a step above that and go into holistic raw feeding. And, you know, we've had mixed reactions about it, but I think all in all, it's been very positive. And our community, our Korean Canine community, has really taken a hold and interest in feeding their dogs a high quality, nutritious diet. So we're excited you're here. Thank you again. And we're here to learn from you, especially about the delicate balance of science and raw feeding. So how would you explain the science behind feeding your dog a raw diet, and what is considered a balanced raw diet?
Okay, so that's huge. And there's actually no sort of one size fits all, simple, you know, straightforward answer to that. So the most important thing that dog owners can do is to feed a really wide variety of different foods to ensure that they're getting a good nutritional profile across the board. So, you know, rotating through all the different proteins, like the muscle meats, the organ meats, bone. I'm an advocate of small amounts of plant matter in our dogs' diets, and we can talk more about that at some point if we have time. But so things like, you know, the 80-10-10 raw feeding model, like that's very popular, but within itself, it's not, you know, over the longer term, it's not nutritionally balanced. So you could potentially get problems longer term feeding that 80-10-10 way, because there's actually no basis to that, those ratios. They're a good guide for someone getting started. And, you know, they're a good place to start, but it's very crude. And most people who feed that ratio, they're not actually feeding the whole prey animal anyway. So they're not feeding the fur and the eyeballs and the brain and all those other...
all the yummy stuff.
I was going to say yucky, but yummy, but yeah, for our dogs. And going to the supermarket and just buying like 80% muscle meat 10% organ meat, 10% bone, it really doesn't replicate, what the wild, canine ancestors were eating. And the quality of, factory farmed produce is so different in nutritional value. So it doesn't compare. It's a good place to start, but it's not a great long-term approach to our dogs. They will miss out on some things. And then the 2 to 3% body weight, feeding a ratio or an amount of food based on 2 to 3% body weight, that's really common as well. A lot of people, raw feeders in Australia, will feed that way. Again, it's a really good start when people are overwhelmed about where to begin. And if they're feeding, including plant matter, and still a wide variety of different muscle meats and organ meats and bone, I think that's probably a better place to start than the 80-10-10. But again, it can be deceptive. So a 50-kilo dog doesn't eat 10 times more than a 5-kilo dog. So for small dogs, it may not be enough food because they're so much more metabolically active. And for large breeds, it might be too much food. So yeah, there's a lot more to it. And go.
And I noticed, in your book, Narelle has a raw feeding guide on her website that I downloaded, and it's got a really good breakdown of a dog's activity level and basically their energy that they burn during the day, or how energetic the dog is. And you really get into the science behind it. I saw some equations there that kind of blew my mind. When I have more time, I'm gonna go through those. But activity level is really important, right? When you're talking about how much to feed your dog.
Absolutely. And activity level is huge, but it's it's the climate, the temperature that your dog's living in most of the time, whether it's in snow or in tropical areas, that will have a big impact on the amount of energy they're burning day to day. But I really want to highlight, coming back to feeding a percentage of body weight, I might calculate that my dog needs to eat 400 grams of food a day, based on, 2.5% of their adult body weight. If I happen to pick like a fattier cut of meat, and I have fat on the chicken necks or the chicken wings, 400 grams of food might give me like 1,000 calories. But if I choose lean cuts of meat, 400 grams of food might give me 500 calories. So you can see there's like a huge discrepancy in, so your dog's either going to lose weight or potentially gain a lot of weight if you're just feeding by that percentage body weight. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So really a lot more just goes into just, percentage of body weight and calorie count and things like that.
Yeah, but it is more practical. And like you saw the equations for, in my guide, and they can be confusing and they can be overwhelming for people to work out the exact calorie content. And when you're using calorie counters, often they don't have all the weird and wonderful things that we feed our dogs in them. So, the percentage, it's a good guide.
So you guys, if you have any questions about nutrition, please send them in we're on Instagram, Facebook Live, and YouTube. So if the Instagram isn't looking so clear on your end, head over to our Facebook address, and we'll be on there as well, broadcasting, and our YouTube channel. Narelle, how would you describe a processed commercial kibble diet in terms of nutrition versus a raw food dog diet? And what do you think is the benefits and deficiencies between the two?
Okay, so the fact that commercial kibbles, excuse me, early morning voice here in Australia, you're the first people that I've spoken to today. So commercial kibbles are processed at very high temperatures, very high pressures. So at the end of that process, they're almost completely devoid of nutrition. So unless they add back in synthetic nutrients and vitamins and minerals, your dog couldn't survive at all on a commercial kibble. They have to add all that synthetic stuff back in. So they also destroy like the beneficial enzymes in the raw foods, which can compromise the digestive function, contribute to leaky gut. They contain, synthetic like additives and flavors and preservatives, which have been shown to be so detrimental to our dogs and to create systemic inflammation in our dogs, which, can cause health problems down the track. In terms of, again, the processing of commercial kibbles, it creates what's called a Maillard reaction, which is a reaction between the proteins and the sugars in the food. And again, that's been shown scientifically to create a lot of damage and a lot of inflammation in the body, which can cause a lot of health problems for humans as well as dogs. Not that we're eating dog food, but, if we char our meat, if we burn our barbecue and things like that, it's the same principle. So,
right.
And the other thing, a lot of kibbles contain, I'm not anti-carbohydrate. I'm not sort of fanatical, and we can talk more about carbs and plants again, because I find that's really controversial in raw feeding. But a lot of the kibbles contain, I think, really inappropriate carbohydrate sources. The soy and the corn and things like that, I don't think is biologically appropriate. And I do think our dogs don't benefit from having those ingredients.
It makes sense. It's not biologically appropriate for us as humans either. So why would it, benefit your dog, who's so much smaller and in some ways more delicate, I think.
And the fact that they live, shorter lifespan,
right.
These things manifest a lot sooner, so they're going to suffer, quicker than we do. But so with the raw food, so that's you can tell I'm not 100% pro kibble. But
yes, and I think that's, I think when you just got a new dog, like, you're a new adopter to Korean Canine or any other rescue group, and it's your first time owning a dog, how many people really know about nutrition, going into it? And they don't. They see the commercials on TV, and it's, it's pretty much already in their mind what they're going to do.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not, there's a spectrum of kibbles. So you can get really, really bad, poor quality kibbles that are full of just nasty ingredients that are so detrimental to our dogs. And then you get the better quality brands that you tend to, price isn't always an indicator, but there are better kibbles. So when I've got French bulldogs, and we bred them at one point, but I knew my puppy owners, it wasn't realistic or practical to think that they would feed a 100% raw food diet. So I raised the puppies on half raw, like raw patties, commercial patties, to make it easier for the owners to feed a complete and balanced raw, in addition to a better quality kibble that they could easily source from, their pet store. So it wasn't, in my mind, the best diet, but it was a much better diet than they would potentially otherwise choose for their dog.
Right. And Rohan actually just put in his question here. For dogs that only like to eat kibble, like his dog, he just got a puppy from us, and the puppy was probably raised on kibble in Korea and then came here, and we're feeding raw. So it's, a different texture. He wants to know if there's any good kinds of kibble, and what should he look for when looking for a better quality kibble than what's, out there traditionally.
Absolutely. And congratulations on your new edition. That's very exciting. So the easiest way and the quickest way is to look at the top 5 ingredients. When you look at so ignore everything on the front of the bag. So ignore the pretty pictures, ignore whatever the title of the food is, turn it over, look at the ingredients panel. The top 5 ingredients you want primarily to be animal body parts. You want muscle meats, you want organs, things like that. So if most of your top 5 or 10 ingredients are grains, soy, corn, rice, gluten meals, and lentils and peas and things like that, it's probably a much poorer quality kibble. And even if we probably don't have time today to get into it, but even if the number one ingredient is, say, beef, but then the next four ingredients are corn, rice, soy, barley, if that's just pure beef, it's still got the moisture in the beef. So the ingredients panels are ingredients by weight before they're processed. So beef with before it's heat treated and dried out has a lot of moisture in it, so it weighs a lot. But once it goes through, so it comes up as number one. But once they process that beef and make the kibble, all the moisture is removed from the beef, so it's actually a much smaller percentage. So beef might be 70% moisture, and once that's removed, soy, which is the second ingredient, which is already very dehydrated before processing, becomes the number one ingredient. And I know that can be confusing. I do whole seminars sort of over hours on sort of helping people understand that. But if you can, more animal parts that are in the top five ingredients, sort of better, as a really quick, crude sort of guide to what to look for.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, less filler, more meat.
Less numbers. So if you see a lot of numbers and, artificial colours and preservatives, sort of run a mile, because there are better options that you can find. I don't know the US brands off the top of my head, so I can't help you with names.
Yeah. Well, we do have some Australian brands here that, well, they say they're from Australia and have some rather interesting proteins in them that we wouldn't typically have here in the United States, like maybe ostrich or kangaroo. Those proteins definitely wouldn't be found here. So,
to give you an example though, like I feed 95% raw, but so I think you can get this in the US. Ziwi Peak. Sorry, I've got like a 4 kilo bag at my feet. This is my go-to. Like, this is such a high quality premium food. And if you look at the ingredients, where are the ingredients? The top ingredients: chicken liver, chicken heart, green muscle, chicken bone. It's, I'm prepared to pay premium for convenience when I need it with that. But, it's not feasible for everyone because it is quite an expensive product.
Yeah.
But that's as close to raw food. Yeah. Sorry, go.
Oh, that's good. Ziwi Peak is spelled ZIWI. We'll actually put it in the chat on Instagram because somebody asked how to spell that. So, there's a lot of studies and trials out there on nutrition and food feeding for canines. What is there really any hard evidence out there yet that tells us that dogs live healthier and longer, or get more nutrition out of a raw diet?
It's like, historically, no, there hasn't been a lot of evidence, like hard scientific clinical trials around the benefits of raw food feeding for our dogs, but that's changing. And there's an amazing team at the University of Helsinki that are doing really good work, because the reason the research hasn't been done isn't that raw food, isn't beneficial. It's just no one wants to fund it. Like, there's no incentive for a kibble company to fund raw food feeding trials because they don't want us to know that it's so much better. And then a lot of the raw food feeding companies just don't have the money behind them, like the big kibble companies, to fund it. But the University of Helsinki has been doing some great work. Like, they've shown, you can go to the website. It's under, like, if you typed in the University of Helsinki dog risk, that's sort of the banner that they operate under. Like, they've shown that puppies fed a raw food diet, or not even 100%, like a 20% of their diet raw, had significantly less allergies and skin conditions as they grew up, whereas dogs fed kibble had a worsening of allergies and skin issues, like 100% kibble. They've shown that kibble increases markers of metabolic dysfunction in our dogs, particularly, an elevation in homocysteine, and homocysteine is like a standard marker of inflammation and is closely linked to like chronic disease and obesity. There's a paper that showed, again, because of the way kibble is heat treated and that Maillard reaction that happens, it creates what's called advanced glycation end products in the body, and they're very damaging to the body, and they've been linked with cancers. So there's a whole study and a whole paper reviewing the increased incidence of cancers in dogs fed, a kibble diet as opposed to a raw food diet.
That's good.
I'll just give a couple more examples, but there's a lot. Again, and this is what I want your listeners and your new rescue people, there was another study that showed just adding vegetables 3 times a week to a kibble diet reduced the incidence of bladder cancer by up to 70 or 80%. I mean, that's huge.
Wow.
So
yeah, that is huge.
It's not that people
is that fresh vegetables
so people don't
or cooked?
Do you know what? Off the top of my head, I don't recall if they were cooked or raw, and that's that's the other thing. There are studies that show there's one study that showed home prepared meals for dogs, and that study didn't say cooked or raw, but they lived 3 years longer than kibble fed dogs, and that was it was a good point that it didn't matter if it was cooked or raw necessarily. It was just the fact that it was a more wholesome feeding approach compared to kibble.
And that's just adding, what kind of vegetables do you think that would be beneficial to add to kibble?
So in the studies, if people buy my guide, there's a whole list of vegetables.
Yeah. Narelle has every single vegetable and what it does exactly and how it works. It's such a comprehensive guide. I was blown away, and I learned a lot from it. So I even saw things like zucchini in there, which is something I would never thought of.
So broccoli, zucchini, green beans, they're all, Asian greens, your bok choys and things like that are really great. Carrots in smaller amounts because they're higher in sugar. But, capsicums, cucumbers.
Oh, that's a big one. Carrots. Everybody has a bag of carrots in their refrigerator for dogs, and they're giving to them as treats. And I'm like, no, carrots are so high in sugar.
Well, I guess, again, you've got to put it in perspective. If someone is giving small amounts of carrot as a treat, as opposed to a processed kibble, I'd be like, fine, it's a treat, it's in small amounts. But if someone was filling half their dog's bowl with grated carrot, I'd be like, oh, and their dog had a weight issue or diabetes or, something else going on health-wise, I'd say perhaps pull back on the carrot and replace it with something green.
Right. Well, just going back to the studies that you mentioned, the one in Helsinki, I wish, they would include some of these rescue dogs that come in with various skin conditions and renal failure and cataracts, because just from my experience on switching dogs that have come in from terrible conditions and are in horrible shape, just switching them in a matter of weeks. And there's so much difference in, their skin, like you said, their cataracts start to disappear, their energy level. So many things happen in that 2 to 3 week period of switching to raw. And sometimes we do the blood test before and after. And that's a testament in itself. That's my clinical trial and why we, exclusively feed raw, because it just, the results are there. It just makes such a difference.
It does. And it's not until you see that up close and personal. It was the same experience. Our dogs were always on kibble, and it wasn't even a good quality kibble. We've got 4 dogs, and it's not till I changed, did extra study and learned about nutrition for dogs. But the change in their behavior, in their poo, in their skin, it was just phenomenal. So
it's a beautiful thing to see that, something that looks so desperate and, daunting can turn into something so beautiful for them. And I really love that experience the most, feeding the raw diet. Is there any, somebody asked if cucumber is okay.
Yeah, cucumber's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
And in terms of fruit, I don't advocate for humans or dogs to get a lot of fruit because the sugars can aggravate dysbiosis and weight gain and things like that. But berries are awesome, and just small amounts of apple or things. But so keep fruits very small. If you're going to feed fruits, I say stick to berries, but you've got a lot more options with veggies.
Yeah, stick to berries. That's good. And here's the one dilemma that we, as I guess not even as rescuers and adopters, but just people who feed raw diet in general, it's hard to find a vet that's accepting of this diet. And what are some ways that we can maybe educate or find a vet that might be more accepting of the diet that we're feeding our dogs? Because a lot of them seem to recommend only feeding a processed commercial widely known kibble. And it can be very daunting if you you go to a vet and your dog is perfect, but they don't like the fact that they feed the raw kibble. What are some things that they are doing, saying right, and also maybe they just don't know about?
Look, I honestly think that the majority of vets really do have their hearts in the right place when it comes to our animals, and they want the best for our dogs. But you don't know what you don't know. So they just don't receive, a high level of nutritional education as part of their training. So, and what nutritional education they do receive is heavily biased by the large kibble companies that sort of sponsor and fund a lot of their programs. So, I've done, I would have done at least 6 years of pure nutrition, study at a university level. So, that's at the forefront of my mind. I understand it, but a vet, doesn't necessarily. So I think they're doing the best that they know how to do. If your vet is really making you feel put down and sort of persecuted with your choices, I think there's enough vets out there to look around and try and find someone. There's holistic. I don't know how it is in the States, but in Australia, we have a couple of sort of holistic veterinary organizations that you can contact, or, type in your postcode and a list of holistic vets in your area will pop up. So that might be a place to start in where to look. But otherwise,
a website in New York, please.
Yeah, it's really handy. We've got a great the College of Integrative Veterinary Therapies, which I did some studies through. They're in Australia and they're really good for letting you know who's in your area that can help you out. But look, my vet I love my vet. She's not holistic in the big picture of how she works, but she's also, what I love about her is she's very open-minded. So if my dog's got diarrhea, which hasn't happened for years, but and I say, look, I'd rather not give the antibiotic. Can I go home and try slippery almond pumpkin for a few days? And she'll be like, okay, but come back if you need to. Or, she knows I feed raw, but she doesn't tell me I shouldn't. I don't know. She's just very open-minded. I just love that she doesn't necessarily agree with me, but she won't. So
it's kind of like she's a vet in the middle, sort of. She's not going to discourage you from it, but she's not going to comment on something that she doesn't have enough maybe nutritional knowledge about.
Yeah, and that's I think that's really big of her. So I really respect her for that. And she sees the health of my dogs, and she can't really
deny that.
But vets are very big on the risks the potential risks associated with raw food feeding, particularly bones. And
they do take an oath. They do take an oath to do no harm. So yeah,
and those risks are valid. But it just means that us as pet owners, we need to be, really responsible and smart about what we're doing. So if you're going to feed raw foods, it's essential that you practice good hygiene around that. If you are going to feed bone, it's important that you do select the right bones for your dog, and that you do watch your dog while they're eating raw meaty bones, because they, a dog could eat a bone perfectly day after day, and then one day, it just goes down the wrong way, and you're not there to sort of
that's
action that.
Right.
And just, feeding a variety of different foods to avoid nutritional deficiency. So there's a lot of onus on the owner to do the right thing, so that these risks that keep getting put out from the vets aren't such a big deal. So we can mitigate them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that you let your vet know up front that you do feed a raw diet, and you've done a lot of research. And I think, kind of, making that issue known up front and validating the reasons why you do it and that you're safe and hygienic about it. And you can find vets. There are a lot of vets in New York City that won't say anything, which is, pretty much like it's a choice that you've made for your dog. So they're not going to dispute that choice. And then there are some vets that are very adamant about the science diets and the Purina Pro plans and food like that. So I think that's really good advice. And to find that elusive vet that has no opinion, I hope it gets easier in the future.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Like I said, there are so many vets out there. It's not worth sticking with one that makes you feel horrible about how you're, feeding your dog. It's like doctors. I tell my human patients, if you don't have a good relationship with your GP, like your doctor, find another one. It's so important that relationship's critical.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So in rescue in general, especially for us at Korean Canine, we typically see three things. We see underweight dogs that come in from a shelter situation where they've been stressed out and probably haven't been eating nutritionally sound food in the right quantities. We see skin conditions, a lot of allergies to, the dogs are coming from Korea where they have a different environment, just even from trees to grasses to pollens to weed. And then they're coming here to New York City where it's a completely different set of, environmental allergies. And we see a lot of skin conditions from that, such as like thinning of hair and rashes and itching and scratching. And then we also see a lot of, diarrhea in the beginning because of the food change. These are common things that I think any rescue sees in the dogs. How could we transition? Let's start with, underweight dogs, especially during this so-called like adolescent years of being a puppy to growing up to 8 to 10 months. The dogs, no matter what we feed them, sometimes just cannot add the weight. Is there something holistically that we could do to maybe if it's a vitamin deficiency or what we could do to help them gain weight in a healthy way?
Sure. And, a lot of people, when they want to put weight on a dog, their first thought is to feed, a lot more fat in the diet. But that can quickly backfire if they add too much fat too soon, because that's just going to cause diarrhea. And if you feed too much fat in the diet, that fat offsets nutrients like vitamins and minerals in the diet. So your dog might be getting fatter, but they still could be starving at a cellular level, like nutritionally. So you've got to be careful with that. And this is where it comes back to me not being anti-carbohydrate, because I think in these situations, there are better carbs that can achieve a nice steady weight gain in dogs in that situation. And often to feed them enough food, increasing the protein content is not financially viable for a lot of people. So my go-tos for dogs, and I see a lot of, primarily I'm dealing with weight loss in my clinic with humans and dogs, but I do get some requests from some rescue groups in Australia that, have emaciated dogs that they just, are going to homes and need to put weight on. So I will say increase cooked whole oats are a really nice addition. Again, whatever you add, it needs to start small and build up. So they can be very soothing to the digestive tract. They're, full of vitamins and minerals like your B vitamins, zinc, iron, magnesium, copper. They can be beneficial for skin health as well. They're a great source of soluble fibers. So while they're increasing calories and helping put weight on, they can also help with the diarrhea and, like loose stool side of things as well. Oats are primarily gluten-free, depends on the contamination sort of levels with the crop. But so oats is good. I love cooked mashed pumpkin. I love like cooked mashed sweet potato. I don't know if sweet potato is a big thing. It's huge here in Australia.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, it's a good. It's pretty popular with the cooked food crowds.
Yeah, so there are really lovely like carbohydrate sources that are going to help to put some weight on. In terms of fats, I would go for things like sardines and mackerel and some of your oilier fish, rather than just getting really fatty cuts of like beef or pork or things like that.
Okay.
And they can be cheap too. You can just buy tinned sardines and tinned mackerel, and just I drain off the liquid, because if it's in oil, it tends to be really poor quality oil. If it's in water, it tends to be very high in sodium, salt. So I just tend to drain that. Some people add it. I advise my clients, maybe not to. And just smaller meals like
no mustard sauce or anything like that. Don't put the mustard sauce of the sardines in the in the food.
Or in Australia, we don't get them in mustard sauce. We get tomato sauce ones in Australia. But so that's a good place to start with the food, and just feeding. Like you might need to feed 4 or 5 meals a day initially, because if you just feed 2 massive meals, like that's a huge burden on their digestive system, which is likely to exacerbate diarrhea. They're less likely to absorb a lot of the nutrition from that food when it's such a massive amount at once. So it's not as convenient, but in those initial stages where you're trying to put weight on a rescue dog, start with 3 meals, see how that goes. Then if you're not seeing the results, increase it to 4 meals, then increase it. You've just got to base it on the dog in front of you. So there's no, this is the rule for dogs, you must feed 3 meals or 4 meals. It depends on the dog.
Okay. And then as in terms of like different species of environmental allergies of trees and pollen and things like that, is there anything dietary or anything that we can maybe not even dietary, but just holistically that we can use on a dog to protect, from different pollens and weeds and the changes?
Well, the first and most practical thing to do isn't dietary. When you bring your dog in from outside, just to wipe them down with a damp cloth to get any of those environmental pollens sort of off their fur, because that's the first point of contact in that sense. Like a whole food raw diet, because a lot of allergies, it's an overreaction of the immune system. So you need to start from the inside. I mean, I just said start from the outside in terms of wiping them down, but washing their feet, because a lot of dogs, get issues with their paws. So wiping them down, but then working from the inside out to support the immune system, which for me is always to support gut health. So you might try not antibiotics, oh my goodness, probiotics.
Probiotics.
Probiotics, your omega-3 fatty acids. So again, those oily fish, salmon, sardines, herring, mackerel.
Now I read in your book that omega-3s are great, but the 2 types of omega-3s is what's important, and the ratio that you're giving it in. Is that the,
you've got omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. So omega-3, you need both. Your dogs need both. We need both. But omega-3, the current sort of Western diet, whether you're in America or Australia, is very pro-inflammatory, because it's disproportionately high in the omega-6 fatty acids, which have an inflammatory effect in the body. So we need to bring up the amount of omega-3s in our diet. You can get them omega-3s from plants, so flax seeds, chia seeds, nuts and seeds. They're good sources and they can help with skin issues, but they're not the best source, because the conversion in the dog's body it's like a pathway in the body, like a metabolic pathway, and you've got to go along the pathway to get to the really good stuff at the end that has an anti-inflammatory effect in the body, and that's our EPA and DHA components of the omega-3 fatty acids. Dogs don't convert that pathway very well, so they get stuck at the beginning if you give them plant sources of omega-3. But if you give marine sources, such as salmon and sardines, they're already skipped all that beginning stuff and they're at the good end automatically. So they're going to get a lot more benefit from incorporating some marine, some fish in their diet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, you guys have some great access in Australia to mussels, right? Mussels would be a good source.
Yep. Yeah, they're all good. And the other thing is for skin health and allergies, it's vitamin C and quercetin. So vitamin C and quercetin, they're both natural antihistamines. So feeding foods that are higher in those compounds is going to have a good effect on our dogs. And the only place you get those, or primarily the best sources, are fruits and vegetables. So,
Nice.
Again, all your
Nice.
coloured
Yeah.
Coloured berries and greens and oranges and yellows and
Oh, we have a question. Benefits of green-lipped mussel, Bao and Bun Law. It's a Jindo duo in New York City. Would like to know what the benefits are. I think that's the omegas, right?
yeah. So greenlit mussel is I love it. One of my dogs at the moment had surgery, and I've got her on greenlit mussel formula for post-surgery recovery, and as an anti-inflammatory agent. But it's got a lot more benefits than, say, standard fish oil in terms of its action in the body and its range of omega-3 compounds.
Okay.
But again, I don't know sort of the company in question, but in Australia, you can, again, there's always a spectrum. So just because you hear a term like turmeric is good or curcumin is good or greenlit mussel is good, you can get really poor quality, crappy versions of all of those things, and you can get really high quality versions that are highly bioavailable and very pure and very beneficial. So it's a matter of being sort of savvy as a shopper in terms of buying from a reputable company. But yeah, greenlit mussel is awesome.
Nice. So a lot of people I've noticed like to cook for their dogs now. We get a lot of recipes and suggestions on we have a forum on Facebook that our adopters belong to, and a lot of them find time that they can cook in a pressure cooker or some sort of slow cooker pot, and it's kind of been popular also with subscription dog food subscriptions like the Farmer's Dog and Ollie. I'm not sure if you've heard of these brands. They're American brands, but they're basically subscription services that deliver cooked meals in packages every week for your dog. And they're sort of prepackaged, but you could also kind of make the same thing. Do you see any benefit in doing if going away from the raw and doing cooked meals versus buying a bag of kibble? And
Yeah.
Are the dogs getting the essential nutrients, and how would people go about doing that?
Again, people have to investigate the individual company or the brand that's supplying them the meals, because if they are complete and balanced, or if they put a lot of effort into putting a wide variety of different cooked foods into that meal, then it probably is, I would say it's a better choice than a kibble. Again, kibbles, they're just so detrimental for so many reasons that we don't even have time to sort of touch on today. Yeah. But I would, in terms of quality, human grade food is always going to be a higher quality just because of regulatory standards than pet feed grade food. Although having said that, like, you pay a premium for human grade, but a lot of the raw or even the, pet cooked companies, 80 or 90% of their food might be human grade, but there's a couple of things that, they're sourcing that just aren't quite at that level, but they're still really high quality, but they can't label the product as, 100% human grade. And they're great. So, I'd say don't be so hung up on human grade if it's a really reputable company that's doing the best in terms of sourcing their ingredients. But yeah, I think a well-balanced cooked food is still potentially a lot better than a kibble. Yeah.
Okay. And is it safe to just switch cold turkey from kibble or any diet besides raw and just go right to raw? Is that? safe to just go from one end to the other end?
Look, I don't recommend people do like an overnight, 100% kibble to raw or kibble to cooked. I think it's quite a shock to the dog's digestive system when you do it that way. Look, some dogs are really resilient. It's like some people can just eat anything and not suffer.
They have a stomach, an iron stomach.
That's right. And the same with our dogs, which is why some dogs actually are better on cooked diets than raw food diets, because they have a weak sort of digestive constitution, and they just can't handle. Like, I've got a lot of human patients that I say don't eat salads. Like, you need cooked foods to really to get the nutrition out of what you're eating and for your body to feel the best. So I do believe it's the same with our dogs. So I'm not, my preference is raw, but there are certain dogs, older dogs or with digestive problems, that cooked is definitely a better approach. What was the question? I've gone
off. The question is cooked diet versus homemade raw. Some people aren't comfortable fully with transferring to a raw diet, so they're doing cooked meals.
That's right. Transitioning. That was where we were. So I always recommend, whatever you're changing, just to, again, start small, build up. There's no rush. There's no urgency. I mean, sometimes there's a situation where, maybe a dog has no choice and it goes from one home or one situation to another and the whole diet changes overnight. And unfortunately, you just have to deal with that. But if you've got the option, start with like a fifth of the meal as the new food, and then do that for a few days. Monitor the dog. If the dog's happy, increase it, the proportion of the new food. Monitor for a few days. So just every 3 or 4 days, it's based on the dog. If the dog starts getting diarrhea, you have to sort of stop or go back. If the dog's handling it fine, you might sort of go through that process a bit quicker. Some dogs can take a week, some dogs can take a month to happily transition, and where their guts and their bowels are happy. Yeah. So don't base it on other people's dogs, just based on the dog in front of you.
Okay, that's good. Any benefit? Luna Baby Bell wants to know, any benefit to adding krill oil to the diet?
Yeah, look, krill's, it's another good option. I'm not 100% sold that it's necessarily a better option. If I had to choose between, I use a combination of fish oil, like high quality fish oil. If you're going to do fish oil, you need to get a really reputable company that purifies all the heavy metals and the pollutants out of their fish oil. I use fish oil and green lip mussel primarily with my dogs. Some people prefer krill.
We're looking at toxicity, right? The toxicity level is really high in some of the commercial brands that we find on the shelf at the pet store.
Yeah, so some social media platforms out there will say like fish oil is the worst thing you could give to your dog, and that's just not true. It is if you buy really poor quality cheap fish oil. So if you buy those big massive tubs, plastic tubs from the discount pharmacy, chances are, and they're like super cheap, and you're like, wow, that's such a good deal. Like, chances are it's going to do more harm than good. Chances are, they haven't purified their products. They're probably rancid before you even open the container. So yeah, not a good thing. Pay more for a good fish oil, buy in smaller amounts, keep it in the fridge, even if the container doesn't say refrigerate, whether it's capsules or liquid, keep it in the fridge, use it quickly, and then, but that's huge. So you do need good quality fish oil.
Another viewer asked, is a raw egg okay to feed your dog?
Yeah, raw egg's fine. There's a lot of controversy about the biotin and the avidin, and but your dog's not going to eat so many raw eggs. Raw eggs is another good one for weight gain too, and balancing a raw food or cooked diet. So chances are you're not going to, there's no issues with feeding raw eggs. Again, as long as you're smart and, Sorry.
Are tomatoes okay for dogs?
You can feed tomatoes. It's not something you'd want to feed a lot of, but they're certainly safe to feed. Yeah.
Okay. How about garlic powder? Very dry. It says dry powder or garlic. Is that okay for dogs?
You've got to be careful. Garlic can be fed to dogs. And the toxicity level, I can't remember off the top of my head, is like a massive amount of cloves per kilogram of body weight of dog. But, a rule of thumb is dogs sort of under 5, sort of up to 5 kilos. I probably wouldn't feed garlic because, their bodies are so small and it has such a big impact. And I think what's, maybe about an eighth of a clove of garlic per 10 kilos of body weight. So it's really small amounts, and it can have a lot of beneficial effects on dogs, but I wouldn't feed it, every day as part of a standard diet. But every now and then, tiny amounts can be quite healthy.
And then last question. Well, we got 2 more questions here before we wrap up, but somebody asked, where do you recommend getting a good quality fish oil from?
I don't know how it works in the States, but in Australia, we have what's called practitioner-only supplement brands. So they're the brands that you can only purchase technically through like a doctor or a naturopath or a nutritionist or a dietitian, things like that. And they're sort of held to a higher standard and a higher quality than what you can buy off the shelf a lot of the time. I don't know how it works in the US. Companies like Thorne, I do know Thorne is a good quality company that you can get on like iHerb.
I think it probably work the same way if you look up a naturopath in New York City and see what they have recommend or have available as well. A lot of the human and dog supplements can be transferable between the two.
You need to be careful. So I just had a thought. Metagenics is in the States and Designs for Health are in the States. Like I know those ones from Australia, and Thorne is good. But I use, because I've been a human, like clinical naturopath for so many years, I do tend to use human supplements for my dog clients as well, because I know the quality is so much higher because, in Australia, like in the States, supplements in Australia are regulated more strongly than they are in the States generally for humans. But the animal supplements, there's no regulation. Like you just don't know what you're getting, and you're trusting the company to do the right thing. Right. So I use human supplements for that reason. But, there's a lot of excipients that aren't necessarily on the label that can be toxic to dogs.
Harmful.
So xylitol is a really big example. So a lot of powders to flavor them and make them taste good for humans will put xylitol in them, but that won't be on the label. But I've always looking, the TGA is the Australian equivalent of the FDA. So every product that I prescribe to a dog, I'm looking at the data on the TGA website, which shows all the excipients. So I know exactly what's in there. I wouldn't recommend people just pick something off the shelf if they don't know what else could be.
You need to really look at the fillers and the binding agents and the purity, right? The purity of the of the main ingredient. Since we're segueing into dietary supplements and we're talking about that now, our next guest is going to be the founder of a CBD company here. And what are your thoughts on CBD working with the raw diet? Would you see any benefits?
So from what I know of CBD, I think it's an amazing compound, and I think it would work really well with the raw food diet. So the challenge in Australia is that it's still illegal to purchase or use CBD unless your physician, unless your doctor has prescribed it to you. So it's not. A lot of people get it in from the States, but even trying to order it in from the States is a risk that it will get confiscated at the border.
So I might not want to take that risk.
So I've never been able to use it in clinic. I've never been able to buy it or prescribe it. So I don't know, a lot about it because I just, I can't use it. I'll put my brain somewhere else to research other things. But that's changing in Australia. But from what I do know, as long as the quality, so the main concern, and your next guest, I'm sure will answer this, but the quality of what you're getting, again, can vary considerably. If you're just buying random CBD off the internet, you don't know exactly what you're getting. So that transparency from the company and, having testing done so you can see exactly what's in there, I think is the most important part. But I think that the potential is huge. I think it's a great thing. And I can't wait till Australia changes its regulations.
Yes, I so hope that you guys get that passed soon, because I think, if there's, it seems like there's a lot of interest in naturopathic and holistic health for dogs, and that would just make sense, go hand in hand together. So I hope you guys get that soon. So Thank you so much, Narelle. Where can people interested in your nutritional and naturopathic services find you, especially for their dogs? And what are your future plans, to continue educating responsible invested dog owners like our viewers and adopters?
Yeah, so the best place to sort of find out more information is on my website, which is naturalhealthandnutrition.com.au. That has my human and my dog details on there. So everything that I'm doing sort of gets put on that website. In terms of the future, I don't know. My husband is Glenn Cook from the Canine Paradigm, and he has been pushing me to do a podcast for a long time now. So, but your viewers may not realize that I am a complete introvert, and it terrifies me to do a podcast. This terrifies me. But I've agreed to do it. So we're going to start putting that together this month. And so it's going to be called Natural Health for People and Pets. And once that's up and running, the details will be on my website, naturalhealthandnutrition.com.au. So I think that'll be great. So it's going to be very evidence-based, science-based facts around health and nutrition for people and pets. So people, I'm asking people to send in questions, what do they want answers to? And so I think it'll be great. Yeah.
We are so excited for the podcast. We're going to be rooting you on in New York City. And I know I could talk to you for hours and hours, but I know it's morning there, early morning. So I'm going to let you start about your day. I want to thank you for joining us and sharing your insight and knowledge with us. I've already learned so much just from this 1 hour that we've had. And we will check in with you again in the future if that's okay, and possibly do this again.
Yeah, no, it's been great, and there's so much that we can talk about. Like, we could sit here all day, and there's so many topics. It's never ending. So I definitely think we need to reconvene at some point in the future and keep the conversation going. But yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care. Bye.